Imagine living beside a really beautiful lake. You wake up every morning to calm water, birds singing in the trees, just a very peaceful, picturesque landscape.
Yeah, like an idyllic sort of postcard setting.
Exactly. Children are playing nearby, farmers are working in the fields. Life just feels completely ordinary. Now, I want you to imagine going to sleep that night
Mm.
and never waking up.
Which is just a horrific thought.
Right. And there's no explosion, there's no earthquake, no fire, no warning whatsoever. Just absolute silence.
It honestly sounds like the opening scene of a science fiction thriller, but it is unfortunately a terrifying historical reality.
And that is exactly what we are focusing on in today's deep dive. We are looking at the true story of Lake Nyos in Cameroon, Africa. Because in 1986, this silent, invisible killer claimed the lives of over 1,700 people in a single night.
A truly staggering number.
It really is. And to figure out how this happened, we're pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources today. We've got geological reports, historical accounts from the very few survivors, and the actual engineering blueprints that were later used to try and, well, solve this crisis.
Which gives us a really clear mission for this deep dive. We need to unpack this bizarre timeline that completely baffled the scientific community for months. We'll explore how a seemingly tranquil body of water became a deadly weapon, the science behind it, and how engineers eventually had to step in to disarm what was, essentially, a natural time bomb.
Okay, so let's unpack this right away because I am already getting tripped up by the premise here.
Sure, where are you getting stuck?
Well, usually when nature strikes, it's loud and it's messy. A tornado tears things apart, a flood leaves mud and wreckage everywhere. How does a lake silently wipe out thousands of lives without a single drop of water flooding the towns?
Right, and to understand how impossible that question seemed at the time, I want you to try and put yourself in the shoes of those very first rescue teams who arrived on the scene. Think about what they were expecting versus what they actually found.
Oh, I'm sure they were bracing for like a massive disaster zone.
Exactly. But it was chilling. It looked as if time had simply stopped.
Yeah, the historical accounts from the sources describe it almost like a freeze frame. Buildings were completely intact. Not a single roof had caved in. No shattered windows, no doors blown off their hinges.
Nothing was out of place.
Right. I mean, in some homes, food was still sitting right there on the dining tables, completely untouched.
And it wasn't just the human population that was affected either. Thousands of animals. Cattle, birds, wild game, even the insects. They all lay exactly where they had been grazing or sleeping.
Wow.
Yeah, and the rescue workers noted there were no burn marks on anything, there were no signs of a struggle, no physical violence whatsoever.
And a few people actually did survive, which, reading through these accounts, almost makes the story even more haunting to me.
It really does.
You have these survivors waking up hours later, just deeply confused. And the main thing they reported to investigators was the complete and utter silence.
Because the entire ecosystem was just gone.
Exactly. Entire villages were affected. Just imagine waking up in your bed and the birds are gone, the insects are quiet, your neighbors, your livestock, just absolute silence.
The human mind really struggles to process a mass disaster that leaves absolutely no physical footprint. That confusion immediately led to a period of just desperate guesswork by authorities and investigators.
I mean, you could totally see why.
Right, because you have an unprecedented mass casualty event spanning multiple villages with zero structural damage. What do you even begin to blame?
Yeah, looking at the initial theories and the sources, they were completely all over the map. Like, was it a biological attack? Was it some kind of experimental weapon or maybe a chemical spill?
Some even suspected supernatural forces.
Which, wait, let me push back on the natural disaster theory for a second.
Right.
Because you can completely see why local populations thought it was supernatural.
Oh, absolutely.
If a volcano erupts, there's a footprint. There's ash, there's lava, there's intense heat. What kind of physical event leaves a wooden table perfectly standing, but instantly takes the lives of every living, breathing thing around it?
It's a great question, and it's exactly why investigators had to systematically rule out all those initial theories one by one.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't a biological agent or a virus, because viruses don't kill thousands of people and animals instantly without any prior symptoms.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it wasn't a chemical weapon, because the autopsies showed no toxins in the blood. It completely defies our basic expectations of how nature operates. But to find the culprit, scientists had to stop looking at the sky or the surrounding land and look directly beneath the surface of the water.
Beneath Lake Nyos itself. Which is crazy because from the surface you look at pictures of this place and it looks like a beautiful postcard. but underneath there was this massive hidden threat.
Precisely. So Lake Nyos sits directly above a zone of volcanic activity deep underground. Now, it's really important to clarify what that means. There was no erupting volcano in the traditional
Right,
sense.
no lava shooting up or anything?
Exactly. No magma was breaking through the surface and boiling the water. Instead, carbon dioxide gas CO2 was slowly, continuously leaking upward through these tiny microscopic cracks in the Earth's crust beneath the lake bed.
Okay, wait, I'm looking at these geological reports and getting a bit confused here.
Sure.
Gases leak out of the ground all over the world, right? Like in hot springs or geysers in Yellowstone or something?
Yes, geothermal vents are very common.
So normally the gas just bubbles up through the water, hits the surface, and safely evaporates into the sky. Why didn't the carbon dioxide here just bubble away safely? Like, why did it turn into a weapon?
That is the crucial piece of the puzzle. Normally, yes, it would just bubble away harmlessly into the atmosphere, but Lake Nyos is unusually deep. We're talking over 200 meters deep.
Wow, okay, that is really deep.
And that depth is the critical factor. When water is that incredibly deep, the sheer weight of the water pressing down from above creates this immense hydrostatic pressure at the very bottom of the lake.
Oh, I see. So the water is so heavy it's actually acting like a physical lid.
Exactly. That massive pressure forced enormous amounts of this leaking carbon dioxide gas to actually stay dissolved in the cold water at the bottom.
So it wasn't floating up as bubbles.
No, it wasn't forming bubbles at all. It was dissolving straight into the water itself, just totally trapped by the pressure.
So if I'm trying to picture this, it's exactly like a sealed bottle of soda.
That's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah, because when you buy a bottle of soda at the store, you don't see any bubbles in it until you actually twist the cap and open it, because the pressure inside the sealed plastic is keeping the carbonation totally dissolved in the liquid.
That is the perfect analogy for what was happening at Lake Nyos.
Yeah.
Year after year, decade after decade, the lake was getting pumped full of carbonation from the volcanic vent below.
But the massive weight of the water kept the gas trapped.
Exactly.
Nobody living nearby had any idea they were sleeping next to a violently shaking soda bottle.
And just like that sealed bottle, as long as the cap stays securely on, the liquid looks completely still and peaceful. You can't see the danger at all. For decades, the gas just continued building up. The deep water became heavily saturated with carbon dioxide, holding this immense, invisible payload in a perfect, really delicate suspension.
Which brings us to the night of August 21st, 1986, the night the bottle was finally opened. But what actually caused the cap to come off? I mean, it had been sitting there for decades without an issue.
The exact trigger is still a matter of debate among scientists today, largely because any physical evidence was just washed away by the event itself.
Yeah, sure.
But the reality is it didn't take much. It just required something to disrupt the layers of the lake.
Yeah, our sources mentioned a few distinct possibilities for this. It could have been a landslide tumbling into the water from the crater's edge.
That's a leading theory, yeah.
Or it could have been an unusually strong wind churning the surface water. Or even just a small, subtle disturbance within the temperature layers of the lake itself, like a sudden cold snap.
What's really fascinating here is that the trigger didn't have to be some catastrophic earthquake. It just had to be enough kinetic energy to push a layer of that deep, gas-rich water upward just a little bit.
Because as soon as that deep water rises even slightly, the pressure from the water above it starts dropping.
Right. And as the pressure drops, the water can no longer hold all that gas in solution.
Just like taking the cap off the soda.
Exactly. The dissolved carbon dioxide suddenly turns into physical bubbles.
Oh, wow. And I mean, bubbles float.
They do. Those bubbles are extremely buoyant, so they rush upward. But as they rush upward, they pull even more of that deep, saturated water up with them.
Which then depressurizes, creating even more bubbles.
Yes. This creates a violent runaway chain reaction.
Man, it's literally taking that shaken soda bottle and twisting the cap off all at once, but on this massive, terrifying scale. The dissolved gas just rushes out instantly. The historical accounts say an enormous cloud of carbon dioxide literally burst out of the water, shooting hundreds of meters into the air.
Just try to visualize that for a second. A massive geyser of pure gas bursting from a silent, perfectly still lake in the middle of the night.
It's terrifying.
But the initial eruption from the surface of the water wasn't what caused the tragedy. It was what the gas did next that devastated the region.
Right, because this wasn't an explosion of fire or shrapnel. It was an invisible flood. And this is where the specific chemical properties of carbon dioxide turn this from a bizarre scientific anomaly into an absolute nightmare.
Carbon dioxide is entirely colorless. Without specialized atmospheric instruments, it is almost completely impossible to detect.
You literally can't see it coming.
You can't. But crucially, carbon dioxide is much heavier than normal atmospheric air.
Meaning it doesn't just float away and disperse into the sky like steam or smoke from a fire.
No, not at all. Because it's heavy and dense, as soon as it shot into the air, it collapsed right back down onto the surface of the lake and then hugged the ground. It literally flowed down the surrounding valleys like an invisible, silent avalanche.
It's just horrifying to think about. An invisible flood pouring through the valleys at close to 50 kilometers per hour.
Moving very fast.
And because it's the middle of the night, people in these villages are sleeping. They're lying in low-lying areas in beds or resting on the ground.
And as this heavy, dense gas settles into the valleys, it physically pushes the lighter, oxygen-rich air up and out of the way. It completely displaces it.
Oh, wow. So that completely explains the autopsies. The victims didn't choke on a toxic chemical. It wasn't poison. The oxygen was literally just pushed out of the room.
Exactly. They were breathing normally, but their lungs just weren't getting any oxygen. They simply lost consciousness and passed away from asphyxiation.
Which explains so much.
Right. That is why there were no signs of struggle, no structural damage to the buildings, and why the rescue teams felt like time had stopped. The invisible flood just quietly extinguished life in its path.
More than 1,700 people. Thousands of animals.
Yeah.
All taken by something they couldn't even see.
It's tragic, and this disaster was so unprecedented that it actually brought a highly specialized scientific term into public awareness: a limnic eruption.
The limnic eruption. Yeah, I'd never heard that term before reading these sources.
It refers specifically to this phenomenon, an incredibly rare event where dissolved gases suddenly and explosively erupt from deep lake water, and it is exceptionally rare.
Really? How rare are we talking?
Only a very small handful of lakes on the entire planet possess the exact combination of extreme depth, immense water pressure, and a constant underlying volcanic gas leak necessary to create the conditions for a limnic eruption.
And Lake Nyos just tragically happened to be one of them. But, as I was reading through the timeline of the scientific response, that immediately raises a massive red flag for me.
Oh, absolutely. What were you thinking?
Well, if the lake sits above an underground volcanic zone, and that volcanic zone is constantly leaking carbon dioxide into the bottom of the lake, does the threat just magically go away after the eruption?
That was the exact question keeping the investigating scientists awake at night. And the grim answer they had to face was, no, it doesn't go away. The eruption emptied the bottle, so to speak, but the underground volcanic leak was still there.
Wow. So the lake would just slowly recharge its deadly payload over time. It was a ticking time bomb that had essentially just reset its own timer.
Precisely. Left completely alone, the carbon dioxide would spend the next few decades slowly building up in the deep water again until another landslide or storm or cold snap triggered a second limnic eruption.
So it was just a matter of time.
Yes, the scientific community realized very quickly that something had to be done.
But if you're the local government, what are your options here? You can't exactly move a lake.
No, you can't.
And relocating all the surrounding communities forever is an incredibly heavy economic and social cost. I mean, people have lived on that land for generations. So how do you tame a natural time bomb?
You have to engineer a way to let the gas out safely before it ever reaches critical mass. Scientists developed a genuinely ingenious solution to prevent the buildup from ever reaching that explosive threshold again.
Okay.
Instead of waiting for decades for the gas to saturate the water, they decided to vent the lake artificially.
Yeah, and looking at these engineering blueprints, the scale of the fix is wild. They installed these massively long pipes. We're talking sturdy, high-density polyethylene pipes that reach from a raft on the surface all the way down to the very bottom of Lake Nyos.
Suspended right in the densest part of the gas layer.
Exactly.
And the goal was to slowly bring that deep, dangerous, gas-saturated water upward in a highly controlled manner.
You just had it up.
As the deep water is channeled up inside the pipe, the water pressure around it decreases gradually.
Which allows the dissolved carbon dioxide to escape little by little, rather than all at once. But let me stop you there, because when I got to this part of the engineering report, my mind was honestly blown. Let's break down the physics of this for a second, because it's great. They didn't just build a vent and hook up a massive diesel-guzzling mechanical pump to suck the water out. The system actually powers itself.
It is a phenomenal piece of fluid dynamics. They use the actual physics of the problem to create the solution. It utilizes something called the airlift pump principle.
Okay, walk us through how that works, because I want to make sure I've got this right.
So to start the process, engineers pump a little bit of surface water down into the pipe just to get things moving.
Right, priming the pump.
Exactly. As that deep, gas-rich water starts coming up the pipe, the pressure drops and carbon dioxide bubbles begin to form. And as those bubbles rise, they expand.
Because there's less pressure squeezing them as they get closer to the surface.
Exactly. And as those bubbles expand, they take up more space inside the pipe. This makes the entire column of water and gas inside the pipe much lighter or less dense than the heavy solid water sitting in the lake right outside the pipe.
Oh, so it's a density issue.
Yep.
The incredibly heavy lake water pushing down on the bottom of the pipe literally forces the lighter bubbly water inside the pipe to shoot upward.
That's it. The expanding gas creates this incredible upward lift. It pulls the water behind it. The escaping gas creates enough force to keep the water flowing continuously up and out.
They literally used the lake's own deadly pressure to power its own exhaust system.
They did. It's completely self-sustaining. Once they initiated the flow, they could just turn their starting equipment off and walk away.
That is so cool.
The expanding gas does all the work, continuously drawing more deep water into the bottom of the pipe and shooting a fountain of safely venting water and gas high into the air at the surface.
It's a remarkably elegant solution to such a terrifying problem. And because it's venting constantly, the CO2 mixes safely into the atmosphere in small, harmless amounts, rather than building up into a massive, heavy cloud.
Exactly. It completely neutralizes the threat.
That is just incredible. And reading the latest updates from these sources, these degassing systems are actually still operating today, right?
Yes, they are. Over the years, they actually added additional pipes to speed up the process. They have been successfully lowering the dangerous buildup of carbon dioxide over time.
Diffusing the bomb, basically.
Essentially, yes. Diffusing the bomb year by year and preventing another catastrophe for the people who live in the region.
It's such a powerful reminder of our relationship with the planet. And for me, it completely upends how we usually think about danger. Nature doesn't always announce its threats with thunderous roars or the ground shaking beneath our feet.
No, it doesn't. And that is perhaps the most profound lesson we can take from the tragedy of Lake Nyos. We are deeply conditioned by evolution and experience to fear the loud and the chaotic, right?
Yeah, the hurricane tearing roofs off, or an earthquake leveling buildings.
Exactly, or a volcanic eruption blotting out the sun. We associate danger with a violent, explosive energy, but sometimes the greatest threats make absolutely no sound. They have no smell, they don't chase you down, they simply wait.
Just a peaceful lake. One quiet night. And suddenly you have one of the strangest, most devastating natural disasters in modern history. It really proves the old saying that sometimes reality is far more terrifying than fiction.
It really does. It requires us to completely reevaluate what we consider a safe environment. If you think about the people of those villages, they had lived in harmony with that exact landscape for generations.
Right.
The danger wasn't some foreign invader, it was an integral, completely invisible part of the scenery.
Which leaves us with a pretty chilling thought to mull over as we wrap up. Knowing that only a handful of lakes have the exact conditions for a limnic eruption, it makes you wonder about the ground we walk on every single
It
day.
really makes you think.
If a tranquil lake can hide a lethal, invisible cloud for decades, how many other incredibly rare, undetectable geological anomalies might be slowly building up right beneath our feet, completely unnoticed by the people living peaceful, ordinary lives right above them?